These aren't real frogs, are they? It's just a spell. Besides, it's the cards you want. Each pack's got a famous witch or wizard.
You shall not pass!
Hey, he's gone. Well, you can't expect him to run around all day, can you?
It's time!
Boom! Here we are again for the second time trying to get this battle going because the people want to see it. Actually, I'm not sure if they want to see it. I know I want to see it. I really appreciate you guys being here with me tonight for the second attempt at this. So we're going to battle two major books in the fantasy genre, being Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and the first book in the Lord of the Rings series being the Fellowship of the Ring. Two major books, and we're going to talk about each of these books in 6 different categories. So we're going to talk about the plot, characters, environment, magic, creatures, and finally the ending. And each of us, we're going to give our own score from 0 being bad, 10 being the best in terms of what we think about each of those different categories. And then we're going to average our scores together and see which book has the largest number and which book is going to be the winner of the battle tonight. Both of these books, I think, are really big gateway fantasy books for people to start getting introduced into the fantasy world of literature. I know for me personally, Harry Potter was that book for me to get reading. I remember distinctly my dad reading this book to me probably not understanding a word he was saying, or just, in one ear, right out the other. But I still have so many memories with Harry Potter. And eventually, when I was able to read, that was the book that got me into it. And I know that's probably the same case with the Fellowship of the Ring, which is how massive it is, right? And it came out back in the 50s. I'm sure it's touched so many people, right? Beyond the movie. I mean, the franchise is huge now, both of them, mega franchises. So I thought it'd be interesting to bring these two together and just talk about these different categories and see, where they land up. What happens at the end of this battle? Who's going to get KO'd? Or maybe there'll be a tie. I don't know.
Maybe.
So for you guys, which one did you guys read first when getting into reading, or did it take you a little bit to get into these books, or was this an entry book for you?
So I was probably exposed to Lord of the Rings before Harry Potter, but probably around the general same time. But I do remember my mom reading out loud, reading Lord of the Rings to us. And it was kind of like you said with your dad, where it was probably, I was young. So it was a little bit in one ear, out the other, but it still sunk in, like clearly. It was very, it's a core memory for myself. And then Harry Potter, I read those on my own, but it was always a family experience. And I do remember standing outside of a Hastings. It was raining, waiting for the midnight release of the final book. So I have some real core memories of spending time with my family and doing these really iconic, memorable things with both of these series. I went on my first date to see The Return of the King, actually. But I just love these franchises, whether it's with the books or the films. They're really special to me, and some of my favorite memories include them.
Yeah, midnight releases. When is that still a thing? Is that going on nowadays?
So.
With ebooks, certainly. I do know some people who, for instance, with Wind of Truth, they stayed up till it was midnight, or I think it was 9 p.m. Eastern, or 9 p.m. Western. But they stayed up and started reading it right when it dropped.
That's cool, but not the same. Not the same.
I'm a little older than you guys, so I grew up with the Lord of the Rings. It was my staple in my household. When I was a kid, I read it when I was around 12 for the first time, and it's the reason I love fantasy. It's the reason I wanted to be a writer. It's the reason I have a YouTube channel. So it's at the heart of everything, really, for me. That said, I was about 30 or something when Harry Potter came out. So I was an adult. I had a daughter. I had 2 daughters, actually, who grew up reading Harry Potter, and I read the Harry Potter books with them. So I have an affectionate place in my heart for them as well. So yeah, I mean, I didn't experience Harry Potter the same way as maybe you guys who were growing up with it and waiting in stores at midnight and all that. But I definitely feel like I sort of got to know those books in a special way through my daughters and the magic that it had with them. So I certainly love both series for different reasons.
That's so funny you mention reading it to your daughter, because I just bought the illustrated edition of the first Harry Potter. You know, that really chunky, big, thick book to read to her, because she's only one right now, so it's obviously not going to sink in at all. But in the future, I'm going to read that there for sure.
Oh yeah, it's never too early to start. Never too early.
That's right.
Yeah.
So in terms of like the stories, I've been familiar with like Lord of the Rings since I was like really young, because we had the movies and stuff, and we watched them over and over. I had stops and starts with the Lord of the Rings trilogy as a teenager. Didn't get to it till I was like, didn't actually read it till I was 19. With Harry Potter, I was one of those, Protestant families that was not allowed to read or watch Harry Potter for a long time. But and I was not a reader until about age 15, 16, and like an avid reader, that is. And then once I started working and making my own money, and I said, can I go buy the Harry Potter books? My parents were like, he wants to buy books with his own money. Let's let him do it. So that's when I got the Harry Potter books finally, and I read them all in like a month, and then watched the movies back to back. So I was a teenager, so I didn't start really young with them. I was like 15, 16, but I love both series, and books and movies, so it's well worth it.
Yeah, that's exactly, all your responses are like exactly the reason why I think these are a good pairing, is that they're a huge influence on all of us, either book. And I'm excited to talk about each of these just to see where the numbers wind up, because at the end we get to determine, objectively, which book is better, right? So the first category, everybody, is the plot. In terms of the books themselves, Harry Potter, I think, is like a contained story. It has a definite start, middle, end. Whereas the Fellowship of the Ring is like part one. I also wanted to call that out as well, is that it's definitely, it feels like a part one. So that might play into the ending score at the very end. So we'll talk about that later. But for the plot, Harry Potter, it's about a kid who's basically abused until he's 11 years old. He finds out he's a wizard. He goes to school to learn how to become a wizard. He makes friends, a few enemies, and then he winds up in a plot of the Dark Lord, who shall not be named, is trying to get back into power. And with the help of his friends, he takes on the bad guy. And does he win? I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about it at the ending. Now, it's a very high-level plot overview of Harry Potter. Any big things you guys think I missed from like the plot itself of that story?
James and Lily, he was killed his parents were killed by the said Dark One that you mentioned, and he's left with this mysterious scar. But yeah, I think you pretty well wrapped it up.
Perfect. And then Fellowship of the Ring, a little bit different of a plot. But what is really interesting is that the way it starts off is with Bilbo, who is turning 111, which kind of strange. Harry Potter turns 11 and the story kind of happens. Bilbo turns 111. I don't know. So after he turns 111, he gives this magic golden ring to Frodo because he wants to go off and set off on his own adventure and travel the world or the planet and see a bunch of things and go off. And Gandalf, a crazy, all kook of a wizard, realizes that ring is actually very powerful, has a dark history to it. And then he sets off with Frodo, Pippin, Merry, and Samwise on a journey to get a Rivendell. And they want to basically destroy the ring, right? Because it's bad. And it's connected to the Dark One, another Dark Lord. All right. And on their way, they create a fellowship with a bunch of people, a bunch of different races. That fellowship, the goal is for them to take that ring and have it destroyed, right? And towards the end of this part, unfortunately, the fellowship breaks apart and some of our characters go in their separate ways. And that's kind of the plot of Fellowship of the Ring at a very high level. Now, if you guys remember the story, because it's been a little bit, anything I missed in that one?
Not really. I mean, the film, I think, is probably stronger in a lot of people's memories. And the film ends at a place that probably feels a lot stronger to a lot of people, because that incident with Boromir doesn't happen at the end of Fellowship. It happens at the beginning of the Two Towers. But other than that, yeah.
Perfect. Look at that. For me, going with a ranking, right, from 0 to 10, it's kind of hard. It's very hard. I think the plot of Harry Potter, I think it has a fantastic, like, chosen one type of trope where we also have an underdog. You really want to see him succeed. He is constantly being put down by, the Dursleys at the very beginning, and then boom, bam, you're exposed to this whole new world, this wizarding world. And I loved the plot itself in terms of just seeing our main character Harry go on a very thematic journey of love, friendship, overcoming fears, and just taking on evil as well. And so I love the plot. I feel like it was actually really strong, even though it's kind of geared towards kids. I mean, it still holds up, in my opinion, as just a classic feel-good story that I can just revisit time and time again. So from a plot perspective, I'm going to say a 9 for plot, 9 out of 10. So kind of a high score there, but I'm feeling it, 9 out of 10.
I agree with you. And like I said, it's every time I've read that book more than I've read any of the Harry Potter books. I know that's kind of weird because most of the time you're supposed to like read the whole series, right? Well, I love book ones, and it's not uncommon for me to pick up a favorite book one and just give it a read. And this is one that is such a nice self-contained story, and it leaves you wanting more, going, oh, I can't wait till next semester or whatever. But at the same time, you're not left going, excuse me. So I really feel like it has a nice, like you said, it has a nice beginning, middle, and end. And even though it's a comfortable, like you never are like shocked by what happens next, but it still feels imaginative. And since it's so vivid and everything, I'm with you. I'm gonna give it an 8 all over for plot, because it's a little bit juvenile, and we're all adults. You're right. It does stand up. I enjoy it every time I read it, but I'm gonna give it an 8 overall for plot.
Still a high score. Still really high. Mr. Jonathan Cohn, what about you, man?
I think it has a strong plot. It does feel like it is an amalgam of a few other things. Like there's certainly several ideas that I would say come from Narnia, like the taking kids out of the regular world and putting them into this kind of magical setting. And then also it's got chosen one tropes that you'd see in like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings. So it doesn't, it's original. The points that I'm going to give Harry Potter are in other areas for certain originalities, but the plot itself, while like going to the school has since become, Harry Potter is the basis of the going to the school in Harry Potter is the basis of the modern trope of, having the academy somewhere. That's really the most unique part of the plot. The rest of it is somewhat derivative. So I was going to give it a 7. It's still really excellent story, but it especially compared to Lord of the Rings, it's in and of itself is I feel a little bit more derivative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
still strong score.
No, I think Jonathan's correct when he says the modern iterations of the magical school, although I do want to point out a Wizardiversity did it way before Harry Potter.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
It's a different thing. There's a bigger emphasis on the school, I think, itself in Harry Potter, and the sort of really what J.K. Rowling did that I think is kind of genius is to combine a mystery with a fantasy with a kind of a genre we're not as familiar with because it's more of a British thing, but the sort of the private, we call it private school over here, but that there's a whole genre of kids books about kids in school, rooming together and the little factions and the bully and all that stuff. And so she did a really brilliant job of combining those three kind of genres into this one book. And I actually feel that the early Harry Potter books are the best ones. The first 3 for me are the best of the Harry Potter books. in terms of the writing, the tightness. I feel like she was at her best when she was writing a more whimsical, childlike story. But that's neither here nor there. Except that I think the plot is actually really good. It's really tight in some ways. I do agree that it's derivative, and no, derivative is maybe not the wrong word, but it does take a lot of inspiration from various places, puts it together in a compelling, whimsical, fun, read that has won the hearts of a lot of people. So I'm going to go with an 8 on the plot of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
And Fellowship of the Ring, right? For me, for the plot perspective, again, this goes back to our point of it not being a self-contained story, because it is a part of a 3-part series or book. Essentially, it's part 1, so it does feel like it's not completely closed off. You're still wanting more. You end up at a pretty good spot, right, in terms of the direction you're thinking the story's going to go, and you still experience a really fun adventure in part 1. Like, you go through a ton of different areas, you meet a ton of different characters, you're introduced to this Dark Lord who you really don't have that much of a grasp on in terms of what his actual power is. There's just so much to explore, but you do touch on a lot in book 1. I think the plot does a really good job of just pulling you into that fantasy world, which I'm sure a lot of people will resonate with, because it's one of the pioneering works that a lot of people go back to. I mean, J.R.R. Tolkien, that name is just synonymous with fantasy, right? So for plot perspective, I'm gonna say an 8. I'm saying 8.
So the thing with Lord of the Rings is when it's going, it's really strong. I think the plot towards the beginning, when you are like once the book's really gotten started, you're in Hobbiton, and you're seeing the information revealed to the characters and them getting ready to go on the quest. It's really strong plot. I think that in the second half of the book, when they've gone to Rivendell, they're leaving Rivendell, and they're going on the journey from there, is really strong. However, you have that portion in the middle where you have the whole Tom Bombadil thing, and it just kind of stops the story in its tracks. And from a world building perspective, or from some character perspective, or magic, that type of thing, that it's really cool with Tom Bombadil. But from like a plot perspective, it just feels like it cuts the energy of the story, and so it for me it docks a little bit of points. But I think I think on originality for the plot, it's a little bit more original. It's more, I would say, more of a foundation, for tropes today than Harry Potter in some ways. But I would say that the plot, I think it has some influences from the Bible, specifically from 1 Samuel. But I think that it is still pretty strong despite the stop in the middle. And so if you combine the two, I would give it an 8. When it's hitting, it's really, really hitting. It's just the only thing that knocks it is just that middle part.
I totally agree with you. In terms of pacing, I was expecting a pace of the movie. That's not the case at all in the book.
Not at all.
So when I was starting it, I was like, when are we going to get going here, man? So I was not expecting the slow pace at the beginning. But when, like you just said, when it hits, when it starts, like, you're in it. So I totally understand you there, man.
Actually, I agree with Jonathan. And if you're comparing the film to the book, and you can see that Peter Jackson streamlined this quite a bit. and as I mentioned earlier, he put the Boromir death scene. Sorry, is that a spoiler or whatever? But, he put that in the film at the end of Fellowship, and it actually is in the Two Towers, which I think Peter Jackson made the right call there.
Yes,
I don't agree with everything he did, but I think that was the right call for sure. And furthermore, I would say there's the infamous prologue to Lord of the Rings, which is a great history lesson about the Shire, and I love it personally. I love getting steeped into the Shire, and I think it has payoff later in the series because you feel that affection. You know the Shire, you love it, you're attached to it. But if I'm just being honest, as plot goes, it's a huge wait, what is this? Where's this? Where can we start with the story, please? I'm sure a lot of people dislike that prologue. I love it, but I'm sure a lot of people dislike it. If I'm being honest, I think it's clunky. I think it took Tolkien actually a while to figure out what he was doing with Lord of the Rings, even because he was supposed to write a sequel to The Hobbit. And it feels that way for a little bit, but then it gets really, and all this stuff is coming in from his older lore and the Silmarillion. It's becoming a different book altogether. So it took him a while. He was a pantser, he was really kind of figuring out as he was going along. So in terms of plot, I'm going to give him a 7. I'm going to give Fellowship particularly a 7. If we were talking about the trilogy as a whole, it would be a higher score, but we're only talking about Fellowship. So it's a 7 for me for Fellowship.
I just love listening to all you guys' thoughts. I think so. I absolutely agree. Like I said, I've read this book almost as most of I've read any book. Like, I think it's fantastic, and I'm not a plot-driven reader. So I am kind of dipping on my score a little bit, but that's because plot's never really what draws me in. And the fact that we get so many introductions here, we get so much world building, we get so much setup. I love that. So I'm going to give it a 7, but that's not really like, if I see that a plot is kind of like the weaker aspect of a book, it's not going to deter me. So don't take that as a knock on the book by any means, because like I said, I think Lord of the Rings is phenomenal, and it's one of my favorite things on the planet. But the plot is probably not the strongest point of this particular book.
No, great points right there. And I have to go back to what you're saying, Philip, in terms of that prologue. It did feel like a textbook to me, and it was a turnoff for a while where I was trying to get into it. I was just like, am I supposed to read this? Like, I didn't know if it was, can I just skip this? But I did read through it. I wasn't enjoying it as much as maybe I should have, because I was envisioning going into like the movie, right? None of this was presented in the movie, so I think it was just my expectations was a little bit different going into the story. But
it's a big old info dump, really.
Yes,
the whole prologue, but I love it personally. So
I don't want to hear anyone complain about Terry Brooks's info dumps when you have, the Lord of the Rings info dumps.
Now, characters, switching it up, going to a new category here. 4 characters, I feel like we have a really good cast here in both of these. And you're starting with Harry Potter, right? We have the infamous trio, all right, Harry, Hermione, and Ron. Like, that's just a classic pairing of 3 people, all unique, and all distinct. Like, they get ingrained into your brain in terms of like these characters and what you kind of almost expect what they're going to do. Like, you almost like feel like these people, and throughout the story, you feel like you become friends with them. I think it's one of the reasons why it hit so hard for a lot of people is that these people, they feel real, right? And their friendship over the story really grows, because I forgot how kind of mean they are to Hermione in the very beginning. Yeah. They are incredibly mean to Hermione, and it was kind of comical, but I love how over time that friendship really did grow, right? And then they became, best buds, and no one can take them down. So those 3 characters are amazing. I mean, the series is called Harry Potter, right? And classic character that anyone can just picture instantly in their mind. Some people that I feel like really drove the story home for me as well was actually the Dursleys. The way that they were presented in the beginning was just a great setup in terms of just growing Harry from this underdog where you just want to see him win instantly, right? We have this family here that's just constantly putting Harry down, and like you grow to hate them. You do not like the Dursleys. So when you see all these things happen to them in the beginning, when Harry finally has not really vengeance, but a time where he's able to get out of that situation, you just love it. And it's really funny to see Dudley interact with Hagrid. That was top-notch humor to me. So I love that. Hagrid's a comical character. I love him. Snape as well was a character that you can't really pinpoint. Should I like him? Should I not? Like the entire read, you just don't know. Dumbledore as well. Classic character that I feel like also feels a little bit similar to Gandalf in a way, because they're both great wizards. I just love the characters in all of Harry Potter. I don't feel like there was one in particular I did not enjoy interacting with in the world. Besides the guy with the cat, he was kind of annoying. Remember the guy, the groundskeeper, not the ground.
Walder Frey.
Walder Frey.
I think that's the wrong book.
Wait a second.
Right actor, wrong book.
So I love all the characters. For me, I'm gonna have to go with a 10 here.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
For
Okay.
characters. I just love them. They're my friends, man. I'm gonna call Harry up after this and see if he wants to hang out.
Yeah, I'm trying to judge these books for what they're trying to be, not, do you know what I mean? I mean, Harry Potter was written for a younger audience, and I'm going to treat it as, and I'm trying to come up with this score. I'm going to consider that this is a book written for a younger audience and for adults who love a whimsical, fun tale. So I agree with most of what you said, actually, Aaron. I think you described the trio really well and the formation of them. As initially the two boys were hostile to Hermione, and then they become allies and then friends. That's a great little narrative. I love the introduction of various teachers, and some of who seem ambiguous, and others who are clearly allies, like Dumbledore, who is really derived from Gandalf in large part. I think we have to acknowledge that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to factor into my score a bit, honestly. But I do love these characters. They're wonderful. I'll tell you what, one of my favorite moments in the entire series was when Harry is introduced to Diagon Alley, and he goes into the Leaky Cauldron, and there are all these people who recognize him, and they're like, oh, it's Harry Potter. Wow. And for the first time in Harry Potter's life, this abused kid feels a sense of belonging and, admiration even. And it's like, wow, that was a really amazing moment for me, for that kid. So there's certain character moments here that I really, really like a lot in here. So I'm going to go with an 8 for the characters in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I think they're really wonderful.
One of the things that makes characters work so well in Harry Potter is voice. They all have very distinct voices. Even before you watch the movies, you know exactly how they're going to sound. That is one thing that J.K. Rowling really has a good ear for, is when she's trying to write a character dialogue and what they're going to sound like, as compared to Tolkien's characters, which we'll talk about in a moment. For originality, there is some, based off of other things. One thing I really enjoy is I really like when your main character does not have too much of a personality, and therefore kind of has that ability that you can put yourself in their shoes. And that's, it's very much a common thing in a lot of epic fantasies to have this very standard character so that you can connect with. But I really like that with Harry Potter, is that, Ron has enough personality, and Hermione has enough, and the villains and the teachers all have so much personality that even though the main character does not, it's still really, it works because he's bouncing off everyone around him, and it feels like you're there with him. And so because of that, I think the characters are really strong. The one thing is, like, things like Dumbledore being similar is the one thing that knocks it. So I would give it a 9. If Dumbledore was a little bit more original in this particular book, it might bump up to a 10, but because of that, I'll give it a 9.
So I mentioned earlier that I'm not necessarily a plot-driven reader, and I am very much so a character-driven reader. Like, I could read a story about paint drying if I was like super attached to and believed the characters, if the dialogue was there, if they felt like real people. Like, I'm probably going to read it. And I just love that, whether it is a minor character all the way up to your main characters, they're all so memorable. And Jonathan mentioned voice. Like, they're all so distinct. And this is not one of those, I mean, other than the exception of maybe Professor Snape, like, for the most part, like, your good guys are good, your bad guys are like deliciously like evil and mostly mustache twitching. And of course there's some plot twists and some, oh, this guy was actually good all along. It's written for kids, and I love the fact, though, that it's just so it's so tasty. Like it's just easy. I love loving these characters. I love hating the ones you're supposed to hate. And I'm going to give it a 9. And the only reason I'm not giving it a 10, honestly, is just it's losing a point for originality, I would say, on some of them. Because like I said, they are a little bit sometimes a little bit on the nose, but I don't even care because it's done so well. I almost feel like they did something interesting with the dynamic of Harry and Hermione and Ron, where if they hadn't have interacted with each other and they didn't have this innate goodness to them and the power of friendship, fueling them forward, we would have had a Slytherin, a Hufflepuff, and a Ravenclaw. Because honestly, Hermione is your stereotypical, you would pin her as a Ravenclaw. Ron is absolutely a Hufflepuff.
Sure.
And Harry seems destined for Slytherin, but they have this destiny that they belong together. It ties them together. And I love that just like carries these characters through the entire story is this bond that they have together and their courage and their bravery and their friendship that really makes the whole story what it is, and it all begins with incredible character work. So 9 for me.
That's a great score. And I love the point you made right there in terms of them. If they weren't together, they most likely be in different houses. Like I didn't even think of that. I always
The sorting
just
hat
saw
just
them.
knows best,
Mm-hmm.
Gryffindor!
In terms of the Fellowship of the Ring, we have a whole other cast of characters here that I feel are iconic. We have Frodo, we got Gandalf, and we got Aragorn, we got Sam, Gimli. Like these characters, like when you picture just a trio in a fantasy setting, you always have an elf, a what do you call those little ones?
Dwarf.
Hobbit.
Dwarf. Yeah, an elf, a dwarf, and just like a standard man or human, right? And like that trio there, I love those three together. Their relationship and how they interact is just so humorous to me because, like just like in the movies, right? They're always like butting up against each other, very competitive. Where Legolas is kind of like just go with the flow, but he still banters with Gimli as well. Uh, I love that whole dynamic. And I feel like Frodo is kind of similar to Harry in a way where you're talking about, Jonathan, in terms of not having, I could be way off here, but not having that much of a personality where he's just kind of, I don't want to say go with the flow, but he is following a lot of directions here and he is working to his end goal, whatever that may be, at least in book 1, because he's not really sure just yet, just getting to Rivendell. And you're kind of just following this cast of characters with Frodo, right? And eventually you do make it to Rivendell, and that's kind of when that fellowship happens, and we get to see them eventually part off, and then Frodo and Sam have their own little journey, which is very interesting, and we get to see more about Frodo as well. So all the characters here, I feel like they're very strong. They do have their own voices as well. Frodo, I feel like, is a little bit lesser than some other characters, but again, Gandalf, I love Gandalf. And one character I didn't even mention was the standout, the one that I was not expecting at all, was Tom Bombadil.
Oh, Tom Bombadil, oh, by water, wood, and hill, by the reed and willow.
This is a guy. They came out of left wing for me when I was reading through this the first time. I had no idea who this guy was and why he's singing every single sentence, and it was kind of like, is he always going to sing? So that took me for a loop. But eventually, after the first few paragraphs of him, eventually I was like, okay, this is who he is, and I was eventually becoming to enjoy him. And I was really enjoying that character and just the skeptical of this guy because it felt like he had so much power, and I didn't know like what his intentions were. Like there was one point where he had the ring in his hand, right, from Frodo, and I was like, what's happening here? Like I had no idea if he had bad intentions or not, but he has power behind him, especially in the scenes afterwards when he gives them Frodo and Sam and and the Hobbit's that song to sing later on, which that was a whole side tangent and I was not expecting either, but I really enjoyed that. And also the age was really strange for me. I was expecting like from the movie for Frodo to be really young,
He's 50.
and he's like, this guy's old going into this crazy adventure.
Hey.
Well, compared to the movie,
Nice save.
And I loved them, but I feel like the characters for me, at least in Harry Potter, were a little bit stronger, or resonated with me a little bit stronger in the sense of just the friendship. But it was very close, so I'm giving it a 9.
I'll
So,
go first.
there we go.
10. So I mentioned that I first listened to my mom read Lord of the Rings out loud to me. That was my first experience. But my first, like, when I'm talking my headcanon for Lord of the Rings, it's the movies, okay? And can we just take one moment to say that it might be the most perfectly cast film of all time? Like, I think it's incredible. And so I have this experience now that every time I read it, what I call it is I call it watching the extended versions, because my headcanon is so vivid thanks to that casting and those movies that I can hear it in the voices of the characters from the movie, from the actors. And it's just such a great experience to be able to just like picture it so vividly because of those, you know, those beautiful films. And I know they're not perfect and everyone has their own opinions, but they are beautiful. And I thought the casting was just phenomenal. So those characters to me though, I just think it's perfect. I can't think of one thing, even Tom Bombadil, that I would even nitpick at. And I just, as far as characters go, like it is what keeps bringing me back time after time after time, is to go on that adventure again, to meet the characters, to form the fellowship, to check the boxes and have one of everybody. And we haven't talked much about Boromir, but Boromir is one of my favorite characters of all time, and he's only in this book. So other than the memory of him, which lives on, but yeah, no, I think a 10 out of 10, absolutely perfect.
The thing is for me is I also have the movies pictured in my head, but even then when I was reading the books, archetype came across strongly. Dynamism for the characters, especially in Fellowship, didn't. I would say that Bilbo felt like he in his few scenes he did, and I would say Frodo and Sam had some good dynamism in the books, but as a whole, a lot of the cast felt of the book felt very flat. You don't see the character dynamics, maybe it's just because it's like a era, like what the time period it was written and the writing style it's written in, but it doesn't feel like it's quite the same character work in terms of, you know, if we were just judging archetypes, I would give it a 10. But in terms of like whether like you connect with the individual characters and whether they're really portrayed well and whether they really are strong, I don't think it's that. I don't personally, don't think it's that great. And so I would dock it quite a bit. So I'm going to give the characters a 6 for Fellowship. If we're taking Two Towers or Return of the King, I might do a little different. I think Return of the King has some good character stuff, and Two Towers does as well. But for Fellowship, I have to dock it a little. So 6.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to actually agree while I disagree with Jonathan, which is to say, you're absolutely right. They're archetypes. They're flat. They're no doubt about it. We're talking about Gandalf, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli. In the books, they are most definitely archetypal characters. But flat to me is not bad. Flat doesn't mean bad. You can have vivid, beautifully realized flat characters. They're there for a reason. Obviously, archetypes exist because we need them. You know, they play an important role. Mm-hmm. And I think Tolkien executes the archetypes masterfully. Plus, we do have the hobbits. Now, if this were about, again, the whole trilogy and we had gotten to the point where Gollum is in the picture, I would probably give this a 10 for characters. But it's Fellowship, and I think Gollum is probably the best realized character in the whole thing. But you do have the hobbits. So you have Frodo and Sam, as Jonathan mentioned. You have Merry and Pippin. who played an important role in keeping a little bit of comedy, in the series. So I think that the hobbits are us. They're us in this story, essentially. The hobbits are us in this mythical, legendary landscape, filled with archetypal characters, and we're just like little people looking around at all this, vast, dangerous, peril all around us, and we're kind of lost in all that, but also in awe. So I feel like Tolkien does have some complexity to the characters when we're talking about the hobbits. They are actually the most human, ironically, of the characters. So this is to say, I think I'm going to go with a 9 on the characters. So not a 10. If we'd been talking, I think Gollum it brings a whole new level to the characterization in the series, but we're talking just Fellowship again. So 9 for me.
A great score. And I do love the hobbits and their desire to always eat. I always found that so hilarious.
I mean, don't you want to just hang out with the Green Dragon and have a pint,
Now, transitioning on to the next category is going to be the environment and setting, like the actual places that we visit in these stories. So for Harry Potter, 2 comes to mind very quickly to me, with that being, of course, Hogwarts, or that's kind of the main place where the entire story happens. And then also the urban setting of where Harry is living with the Dursleys, right? We get to see, Privet Drive and just the cookie cutter houses, and you get to see the zoo a little bit. So it's just like that urban feel, and then bam, you go into the Hogwarts world and be amazed there with some of the crazy contraptions that wizards use, and just the world is completely different. In terms of settings, is there anywhere else that I'm missing in book 1 at least that besides like
Diagon Alley?
Diagon Alley, okay.
The train ride. I mean,
the train ride too. Yeah,
the train ride. Yeah.
Chocolate frogs, can't forget those.
It was in the intro. I can't forget about it. Yeah. So, some of these scenes, like Hogwarts in particular, is just, I think, iconic, where you can really picture it. You can see it in your mind. I loved reading through it and just interacting with the actual castle itself and the ghosts that just travel through, and nearly headless Nick is talking and the paintings are talking to. I loved that setting. I thought it was awesome. And even going through the urban world, right, the normal Muggle world, was interesting as well, because we had to see it from Harry's perspective of living inside the cupboard, basically underneath the stairs, and sometimes going to his neighbor's house that had a bunch of cats, right? I loved seeing this too. But yeah, now you guys mentioned it, the train ride was a lot of fun. Diagon Alley was also really cool, very interesting. That's where you get exposed to this crazy wizarding world, and you get to see all these things here and there, and experience the wand, right? And see the Nimbus 2000. There's so much to take away from it, and I really enjoyed it. So, environment and setting, I'm gonna say a 9 on that one from me. Also, something I didn't tell you guys, but we can do decimals in here too. You can go 9.1 if you want.
Too much math for me.
No, I have a spreadsheet. That does the math for you.
Oh, okay.
This is already hard enough. Goodreads broke my brain, and I'm on a 5-star system permanently now. It's terrible. So, I actually think that this is where Harry Potter shines the most in general, but especially in this book 1, because I mean, of all the things you touched on, every single aspect of that was just so vivid in my mind, and it's what makes it so special. Like, even like you said, the parts where they're describing London, it made it seem so droll and so it was just the opposite of a fantastic world. And then to see him transported from this gray, it's not just that it's London, it's just that his life was so terrible, and they painted such a vivid picture of what it was like in his day-to-day life. And even his trip to the zoo, which should have been a reprieve, was a miserable day for him. So like I love how she paints this vivid picture of his life before and then his life after. And then I'm talking everything from like the train ride to Diagon Alley to Hogwarts. I mean, oh my gosh, it's Hogwarts. It's Hogwarts at Christmas time, Hogwarts at Halloween. Like it's just incredible. And so I'm not trying to be the 10-star strumpet here, but I am going to I'm gonna give this a 10 on the environment and the world building in this first book of Harry Potter. Because it was just
10.
it absolutely transported me. And that's what I'm looking for in a fantasy book, is to be transported. And I think they delivered big time.
So I agree that it's very transporting, and also the idea of contrasting the before and the after, how dim his life is to how bright and shiny and how awe-inspiring everything is. That is a very strong point in the book's favor, and all your points I think are very valid. I don't know if I can give this one a 10 for Harry Potter. I do have a category that I give Harry Potter a 10, but I'm not putting it there. So I'm gonna give it a 9.
Generous. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think for me, Hogwarts is magical. It's really beautifully realized. It's quirky. Of course, it would never pass any kind of
accreditation,
child safety test, or anything like that. It would be closed down, probably in any kind of world. But then the wizarding world, we love it, and I think that in maybe the thing I even love the most. It's close though for me about the Harry Potter books, but yeah, this one is. Since you said we could do the point stuff, I'm gonna throw one in there just to be a maverick here. This is me being wild and crazy. I'm gonna go with an 8.5 for the Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
I love it. 8.5. I got it written down. Now for Fellowship of the Ring. I feel like we got to hit some amazing places here just in the first book. Like the Shire alone. Like I know you're talking about the prologue a little bit, Philip, in terms of you get to really flesh out the Shire a little bit. So that is a place that you kind of come to love for sure. And then like Rivendell is insane. The mountains that they trek through and the mines of Moria, are also distinct. And then just traveling the roads through Middle Earth. It feels alive. It feels real. And like you were saying earlier, Madison, it did transport me, feeling like I was in Middle Earth, just like in the movies, right? You feel like you're there, and I feel like Tolkien did a fantastic job showing or showcasing these different settings that all still feel like in the same world, where they're not distinctly like contrasting. They all feel like it can fit inside of Middle Earth, and it all felt connected. So I'm going to give it a 9 as well on my side. I really enjoyed it. A lot of things that are iconic, like Rivendell, the Shire, of course. And I love the mines, by the way. The mines were just so much fun to travel through because you weren't really sure what happened there and why, where everyone is. Like that was so confusing to me. And then the thumping and then the thing that comes out afterwards. I was like, wow, this is amazing. So setting, environment, I'm saying a 9.
This is Middle Earth we're talking about here. This is a place that the dude spent decades developing. Before, he has multiple languages that he invented for Middle Earth. And this is perhaps the single greatest feat of world building in the history of humanity. So I feel like this deserves, can we go higher than a 10?
I'll give you 10.1. We can do that.
Wow.
All right.
Extra credit.
I guess, we'll do 10.1 then, because this is Middle Earth. And I just feel like it defines fantasy, actually, in so many ways for many of us, as world building, as a place where readers go to immerse themselves in a world. And there are very few series that you can put anywhere near it. Maybe, I don't know, Wheel of Time, Malazan Book of the Fallen, Realm of the Elderling, some of the bigger, longer series that are actually much longer than Lord of the Rings. They need more space to get close, to Middle Earth. So for me, it's just there's nothing like Middle Earth, and I'm going with a 10.1.
I love it, 10.1. And I think the reason why Middle Earth, at least from the book, didn't land as hard as it did, maybe probably for you, is because I came into this series way after reading so many books. Like I read Fellowship of the Ring for the first time like 3 months ago. It was my first time, so I was exposed to all these fantasy books that took inspiration from Middle Earth into their stories, and that was my first interaction with these fantasy worlds. So in my view, like I already experienced a little bit of this, right? But Tolkien is probably the inspiration for those worlds. So
no doubt about that.
Definitely get it.
So, I mean, Philip kind of already said it all. Like, this is Middle Earth. One thing I could go on I could talk by myself for an hour about this topic. But one thing I absolutely love about this book is that even though you're dealing with mostly humanoid characters, you're dealing with things that we have here for the most part at a glance, trees, rivers. Never at any point did I feel like this is my Earth ever. It has a way of feeling familiar and comfortable and cozy, yet completely original somehow. And so often, like, this is why world building is so important to me, because so often I'll pick up a book and I'm just like, oh, let me guess, there's 2 moons. That's how you know we're not on Earth, or something like that. And it's just like so many shortcuts are taken. And this is the opposite of that. And I think it's just important for me to say, like, just like on Goodreads, how there are different versions of 5-star ratings, like sometimes it's 5 stars out of enjoyment. Sometimes it's 5 stars because it's a masterpiece. I'm also going to give this 10 out of 10, but I'm going to just say a Lord of the Rings 10 is a little different than a Harry Potter 10, but I feel like they both deserved it in this topic.
Now, I guess I will say that I think that
you're giving it a 5, aren't you?
No, I think that this is the single area that he put the most time in and put the most work into, and it shows the best. And Philip, you were right. Think about the other people who worked to compare it. The only author that I feel got as close with each place feeling like a unique place, each people group or each race or something, like all of that. The only thing for me that got close was the A Song of Ice and Fire, and even then, it took way longer, and it's just not the same. So I'm gonna match everybody. I'm gonna say 10 as well.
Wow,
good call on A Song of Ice and Fire too. Yeah.
Transitioning into one that I think is gonna be a lot of fun is magic. So this category, I feel, kind of directly fits with Harry Potter because it's the wizarding world. I mean, magic is there. It's in your face. You see magic everywhere. Once Harry gets to Hogwarts, it's all over the place, right? Even in this Muggle world where the Muggles don't even know. I still don't know how Muggles don't know there's wizards out there. It's insane to me.
Don't get me started.
Erase their memories. Yeah.
Are you holding a wand right now?
This is my wand, yes.
Oh, there we go. We got a wand.
Okay. This is actually Snape's wand. It's very nice.
Oh, that's nice. The
magic. I actually went to my daughter's room to get a wand. So.
The magic, I feel, though, it's a little bit different in Lord of the Rings, where it's not as in your face as Harry Potter, where it's, I guess you could say, more subtle. Where Gandalf definitely has his staff and he uses it for certain things. Tom Bombadil has some weird connection with nature somehow and is able to do things. There's elven magic too, right? There's magic in this world, but I feel like it's at a lesser extent compared to Harry Potter, because in Harry Potter we have kids waving wands around with sparks coming out of them and they're levitating things. For me, magic for Harry Potter, I'm gonna give a score for both of them. For magic, I'm gonna say a 10 for Harry Potter, just because there's so much variety there in that world. And you only exposed to the small stuff, the kid stuff. This is first year, right, of Harry Potter, and there's so much more than that. But what we are exposed to is just, mind cementing, where you want to get back into it. Lord of the Rings, I'm gonna say an 8 for magic, just because I didn't feel as though it wasn't as apparent compared to Harry Potter. It's definitely there, and it's interesting. It's at a lesser extent to me.
Going with both. Harry Potter's, I think, is a great example of having a more defined magic system, but leaving it open enough that you can adjust. You don't feel hemmed in. There's so many magic systems where it's so particularly defined as a hard magic system that you feel like you are studying with the people that are learning the magic. With Harry Potter, they're learning spells, but there's like, especially when you get to later on in the series, they're able to add new ones. They're able to, we learned this new element of the magic. And so it's like a hard magic system that has softness to it. And I really like that. And I think that makes it really strong. So for Harry Potter, I'll give it a 10, which I said I would have something Harry Potter in the 10 category. For Lord of the Rings, it is, I also think, a great example of a softer magic system where there's a little bit of definition to it, but really, Gandalf is able to do wizard stuff, and you don't really need to know how he's doing it. And Sauron was able to, bind himself into the ring. How does that work? You don't need to worry about that. So it's not quite as defined, but I like its simplicity because it shows that you don't have to, twist your mind into learning how everything works. You can just go with it. And it's a great example of, you can quickly understand what you need to know and then move on to the other stuff. So I really like the soft magic system of it. I just think Harry Potter's magic is a little bit better. So I'll give Lord of the Rings a 9.
I actually feel like these categories are weaker for me. Harry Potter, I have a lot of issues with the magic system here, and I'm not a hard magic system. I'm not a hard magic system person. I don't need a lot of, well, how, why, all that. But even as a kid, I was going, well, if they can do that, then why can't they do this? And well, that doesn't make sense because, and so it's just something that's always irked me. And I have to, when I'm reading Harry Potter, I have to tell myself, don't be a nitpick. Like, that's not fun. That's not the point of these books. But it does always linger in my head, some questions I have about this magic system and how it functions in the world. So I'm going to give Harry Potter a 4 on the magic. I know.
Whoa.
I know, hater. But
Do you mean out of 5?
Same time, but at the same time, it is fun. Like, look at me. Like, I have a wand. I have spells memorized. Like, we still joke around about home. Like, trust me, like I enjoy it, but like as a magic system, and then as Lord of the Rings, I'm gonna go low with this as well because it never ever it's never an issue for me because to me it's just Gandalf is magic because he's a wizard. Like the elves can do magic, well obviously because they're elves. Like I don't need the explanation. I enjoy the softer magic system. I love all the questions you get with Sauron and this evil magic, and the rings and what can they do, what can't they do. But there's still not a lot to sink your teeth in this first book as far as magic goes. So I'm going to give this one a 6. I told you I wasn't just going to be the 10-star strumpet.
You made up for it, more than made up for it.
I actually agree. I agree with a lot of what Madison said in regard to Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, but I'm not quite as as what's the word I'm looking for here? I'm going to give it a higher score. Yeah. No, I think you said it really well, and for me, it is a little clunky, but because it's a children's book, I'm more forgiving of that, and I like the whimsy of it and everything else, and I like to say Wingardium Leviosa too and all that. So I'm giving it a 7 for the magic, and Lord of the Rings. I have a slightly different take on it, I guess. For me, it is the softest of soft magic systems, and it is actually part of the reason that I love this so much is that there's an inherent reverence to the story that is part of Tolkien's faith. It's there's a certain way in which you could look at this reverence as extending to the very landscape itself, to the underlying life and everything. And that is part of the magic. You see that especially through the elves, but it's in everything. And that's the lens through which I think this world really comes alive, through that sense of magic imbuing everything and permeating everything. So for me, it's not just about the spells and the fire and everything else. For me, when you say magic and Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth in general, I'm thinking of it in terms of this reverence that is just present. And so I'm going to go with a 9 for the magic for Lord. I agree that it's not perfect, but I think a 9 in my case. Yeah.
I love the way you put it as well, Madison, in terms of Lord of the Rings, in terms of you're not really sure what happens. Well, again, like you all said soft magic system. I think I said it as well in a different way, where I was like, it's not as clear. The rings, I'm still so confused what the rings can freaking do. Like why are they, what can they do, right?
Whatever the author needs them to do.
Yeah. It can make you invisible, or at least
all one of those. Yeah, they can make you invisible, and it's not good. It's not good. But in terms of the score, it is incredibly close right now, like by a point, like 0.1 close.
If Lord of the Rings wins by 0.1, we know why.
It is so close. I've never seen this close before. Next category, we're going into creatures, and creatures is a fun one, right? These are, anything that's not really a human. From there's like a typical fantasy story, anything that's not, it's us, right, humans. And I feel like we get a lot of variety in both of these stories. Like in Harry Potter, we got goblins, we have dragons that are apparently underneath Gringotts, we have Fluffy the three-headed dog, we got a troll, unicorns are in there, and then ghosts as well are roaming the castle. And I also feel like he who shall not be named is also a creature as well, because like he's living on the back of someone's head. It's so crazy. I love the creatures in Harry Potter. I think I didn't even touch on all of them. Like, oh yeah, centaurs too as well. And the big spider. Is there a big spider in book 1?
That's in the second.
I think that's second book.
Yeah. Second book, okay. Centaurs are in there for sure. So there's just a lot to take in book 1, and I feel like it fits the wizarding world to a T. It wasn't out of place at all. So I loved it all there. So for me, creatures, I'm gonna say a 9 for creatures, and then going straight to Fellowship of the Ring. We have a lot of fun things in here too. My favorite one, the coolest thing that I think I saw in book 1 was the Balrog, crazy big fiery creature with this fire whip, which is just amazing. It's so cool. Also the ring race. The ring race was very interesting to me because the way that they're presented in the movie was very different to how they were presented in the book, at least initially. Like the ring race, I felt like they were just talking like normal Joes to the hobbits for a little bit, but in the movie, like they were like hissing at them, so it felt a little bit different. Elves, of course, dwarves, hobbits, trolls. I believe there's ghosts. Is that what the Barrow-Downs place is? Like there's these spirits.
Barrow-wights.
Yeah. Barrow-wights, okay.
Yeah, they're ghosties, yeah, or whatever.
So again, a huge variety here, and I'm just gonna even it out. I'm gonna give both a 9.
Yeah, this is the one area where I do feel more critical of Harry Potter than any other. And it's just that I feel that it felt a little cheap sometimes to me how we would just grab from various mythological traditions and whenever we need, it was whimsical and fun, but it was the least, I feel, thought out aspect of the Harry Potter series for me anyway, was just the creature of the week kind of thing. So there was no depth really very often to any of these creatures. They were just kind of fun, and let's toss a dragon in this book, and then we'll have werewolves in this one, and then move on to the next, and it was just kind of grabbing from various places, and that probably bothers most people less than it bothers me. But that for me, it's not that it didn't work for me. It's just that it felt a little too easy sometimes. So for me, the creatures, I'm going to go with a 5 for Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Whereas for the Fellowship of the Ring, anybody who plays D&D or anybody who has read other fantasy knows that, once again, hello, the dwarves, orcs, elves, basically the way we think of all of these creatures is a product of Lord of the Rings. That's just, that's how influential this has been. So it may not feel as original today when you go to Lord of the Rings, but when Tolkien wrote, this was his conception of elves. This was his conception of dwarves that was based, all these were based on his being rooted in, knowing Old English and Old Norse and various other languages, and knowing these old mythological traditions and drawing from them, but also adding his own spin. So he really, I think we owe so much more to Lord of the Rings, and we see the Nazgul. I mean, let's just be honest. When we meet the what are they called in Harry Potter? Everybody knows they're really Nazgul.
The Death Eaters?
No,
the Death
no.
Eaters. What are they called?
I know what you're talking about.
When not, they're on the train, right? When
on the train.
Harry's on the train.
The Dementors.
Dementors. Dementors
prison Mike. The worst part about prison was the Dementors.
Derivative of Nazgul. I mean, that's pretty obvious, right?
Yeah.
So for me, Lord of the Rings is just so, the influence of it, the originality of it when it was written, and just how well realized they are. For me, I'm giving it a 9 for creatures.
I really agree with Philip on a lot of this. I agree that Harry Potter's creatures are not very strong, and it's the grab bag.
Think about Fluffy, though. Think about Fluffy.
What I would say is the creatures almost seem, a lot of the time, like they're kind of in service more of the magic and world building than they are the creature itself. Whereas I would say Lord of the Rings, very much the creatures are very, aren't necessarily connected to the magic of it. The creatures feel more standalone-ish, and they are really unique. The Balrog, in and of itself, is incredibly unique. The Nazguls at the time were incredibly unique. And the 3-headed dog, it's not. I mean, it's cool, but it's not that unique. Just putting 3 heads on a creature, and you don't feel there's any meat to the the story of the centaurs or anything. So yeah, I mean, I like that it has creatures, and it does feel magical because of that. But that's why I give more credence to magic than I would creatures. So I'm going to give the creatures a 5 for Harry Potter, and for Lord of the Rings, I would give them. I'm just going to copy Philip. I'm going to give it a 9. Because I do agree that they're very strong and seminal to creating as they are now.
I really like you guys' discussion on that. I'm contemplating changing my score. Is that allowed?
Go with your
because
gut,
the way that you talked about originality, right? Like the Balrog was just something I've never seen ever, and like you mentioned the Nazgul as well, the Ringwraiths. At the time, like original, right? But in Harry Potter, right, we have a lot of things that you expect to see in the fantasy genre. So I'm gonna bring it down 1 point from a 9 to an 8.
And I agree with these guys too. When it comes to Harry Potter, I really enjoyed all the creatures because they were in like fun scenes. But for me, like Jonathan said, where the creatures almost speak more to the magic in Harry Potter, I almost feel like they kind of enhance the characters in a way. Like the reason we like Fluffy so much is because of how fond Hagrid is of Fluffy.
Yeah.
And because that scene is so adorable to see him just like baby talking to his puppy. And to me that the interactions with the character, the creatures just kind of enhance the experiences and the dialogue that goes on and stuff like that. So I enjoyed them. I find them memorable, but I do not find them to be original at all. So I'm going to give them a 6.5 And I think that's a hearty thumbs up, but just nothing that's rocking the boat or anything. And I'm also gonna give the Lord of the Rings characters or the creatures, excuse me, a 9, because of the same reasons. Like these created the stereotypes that everything is branched off of, or he was one of the first guys to really dig them up out of lore and history of our own and make them mainstream. And I just give like major kudos to that. And they're also just so memorable. Like I think, the scene with what is it in the Mines of Moria? Is it goblins that come for them, or is it trolls? I can't remember. Either way, I mean, just they are so disgusting. It's like you can hear them, you can smell them, you can imagine how scary it would be to be in the room with them. And just the way he writes those creatures and those scenes that involve the creatures are so iconic. So I've got to go a 9 on Lord of the Rings, or excuse me, Fellowship of the Ring.
In the films, it's goblins, but they have a cave troll.
That's a good point.
And guys, we are now at the last category of this battle, and we do have a leader so far, but maybe this last category might change things up depending on what scores we give. So, last category is the ending, right? The ending of both of these individual books. So, for the ending of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, like we talked about this earlier, where it has a distinct ending, a feel-good ending, where you could read that and be happy with that book and not have to move on to the rest of the series. That's a self-contained story, and you'll be happy, a happy camper after finishing it. With the Fellowship of the Ring, it's a little bit different because it is part 1 of a 3-book, series. And it definitely leaves you with wanting more because a lot of questions are not answered yet. There's a lot of things you have not seen yet. Like, we didn't even touch, like, we barely see little glimpses of Gollum, right? He's not even in the story at all.
Really?
We just see him, like, kind of scurrying around a little bit. And, like, that's not even touched on. So there's just so much more in terms of the Fellowship of the Ring. What's going to happen afterwards? Is Frodo going to succeed? Is the trio of Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn, are they going to succeed in getting back the hobbits that were taken? And what's going to happen to Merry, Pippin? Like, there's just so much left on the table in terms of what's going to take place. So in terms of the ending, the way that Harry Potter ends with, it's just so satisfying seeing Harry come out of the pits of abuse, right? From being under his aunt and uncle, just in basically torture every day, living with his family, and seeing him, whip Voldemort's butt again, even though he was a baby the first time, was just, so satisfying and a huge payoff. So I'm gonna give the ending of Harry Potter a 9 because it's just so satisfying. Like it ends in a way where you're happy to see a main character. The arcs of all the characters, especially the main trio, really come into fruition, where you see Harry become a new person, the friendship grow between the trio of Hermione and Ron, and it becomes a whole new dynamic for Harry later on. So I really, really enjoyed that. And also, Dumbledore, he gets his butt whooped, man. I mean, that's always fun to see. Did I say Dumbledore? I meant Voldemort. Voldemort gets his butt whooped, which is awesome. So for the ending of Fellowship of the Ring, I'm going to say an 8. Because there's a lot left on the table, but it is still a very fun, engaging ending that does leave you wanting more.
So for Harry Potter, I mean, it is a book written for children, and I love the fact that it offers some satisfaction. It offers some closure. The good guy, he doesn't defeat the bad guy long term, but now all of a sudden we have a real plot. We're cooking. We know that the bad guy is back. We know that he can be harmed with magic. We know that he's beatable. So we have it's kind of just this perfect setup because now the readers are going, oh my gosh, now I've got to pick up the next book. But it ends in such a way that you can wait for the next book to come out. You know, like you can wait for your library hold. You're not waiting on pins and needles, but it leaves you enough of a hook because you went, Harry went back to those people. You know, what's his summer going to be like? What's going to happen to Harry? You know, is he going to get back to Hogwarts? Are the Dursleys going to, you know, try to sidetrack him again? Like, is Voldemort going to find him in the meantime? Like, it leaves you with enough wanting more, but it's a nice, you know, tidy ending as far as books are concerned. So I'm going to give that ending an 8 because it's a little, I don't know, just a little tidy for me because I do like a little bit of a cliffhanger. And that's why I am going to raise up my fellowship a little higher than an 8 because I like the cliffhanger, and I like that this is a gentle cliffhanger. Because on one hand, it's like you should be frantic because Merry and Pippin, where are they? Like, what's going on there? You know, like there's all this other stuff going on in the background that you should be frantic, but it leaves you with this like peaceful send off with Sam and Frodo, and it's just one of my favorite scenes ever in the book. But I just love this right here where he says, "But I'm going to Mordor. I know that well enough, Mr. Frodo. Of course you are, and I'm coming with you." Like, duh, it does not get much better than that. And I am a sucker for Sam. I named my child after Samwise Gamgee.
Oh
So
wow.
like,
Wow.
this scene to me is just it's beautiful. I mean, his name's Samuel, but I know in my heart he's for Sam.
Samwise.
Yeah, he is Samwise in my mind. And he is like, I think you should name your children after characteristics you want to see in them. And like Samwise Gamgee is loyal and he is. I mean, never mind. We're not going into character descriptions, but I absolutely love the ending of this because it's a perfect balance of I got to pick up the next one because I need to know what happens, but it's also this. I mean, I can just see them floating down the river, and it's just a nice peaceful send off. So I'm giving that one a 9.
I'm always impressed by people who get like, I have a Lord of the Rings tattoo or whatever, but to name your child after a character, that's commitment right there.
Well, and then I know a lot of there's several Sam characters. We even mentioned the Samuel from the Bible earlier. There's a lot of Sam characters that are very important to me, and I feel like offer characteristics and virtues that I would hope to instill in my kids. And so that was a one I was really happy to get in there.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I guess I'll just go ahead. I'm not going to upset much here with my scoring at the end. I do want to give a little tip to the use of the mirror at the end of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I like that little cleverness there.
It's lovely.
That was what you most desire, you know, and using that and making that into a moral point of maturation for Harry, an important point of his development, I thought was a really nice touch. But I do agree with some of the points that Madison had as well. So I'm also going to go with an 8 for Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And for the Fellowship of the Ring, I'm going to be slightly forgiving because it is really one book in Tolkien's mind, the whole of Lord of the Rings. So it's a little unfair in a way to hold it to the same standard to say, well, it's not meant to be an ending, really. And it certainly wasn't in Tolkien's mind. But it does leave off, I think, in a pretty good place as far as, you know, where it does leave off. And so I'm going to go with an 8 with that as well. I'm just going to keep them together there with an 8 for each and leave it to Jonathan to radically change everything here if he wants.
Gotta give out a 1 somewhere just to throw it down. No. So, you know, the thing is, it's an interesting distinction between Fellowship of the Ring movie and book here, because I would give the movie a near perfect ending because it is tragic, it is hopeful, it is heart-wrenching, it has amazing music and like paced so well, as from the action to the climax to the denouement, all of it. So I would say that, you know, the movie is just like ends Fellowship perfectly. True. But the book doesn't have quite the same epicness to the ending. It still has that great quote that you read, Madison, that is just it's so good. And then it also has just some great inspirational hope that that even though we've had these setbacks, we're still moving forward. So it still has that in a way. I just feel like it was done better in the movie. For Harry Potter, I think that, as you guys both said, it ties everything up really well. But it's always bothered me a little bit that, and this is less like the major ending with finding Voldemort and more the minor ending with the point system, where he's giving out all of these huge points to each of them, and then Neville gets 10, even though he said that was like the bad, like what was it, like the strongest or the bravest thing that they all did. And it, to me, like when she did that, I understand why Dumbledore might have been a little cheeky doing that, just to kind of rub it in, like, oh, it's only 10 points, like it's not a full 50, it's you were that close to, But I also think it's a little bit of from Rowling's perspective of recognizing I need just a little bit more because I wanted to clean 50, and I need 10. I need to get him over, and so that's just her throwing that in. But I didn't like the way she threw it in. So I would even though it's really neatly tied up, I would dock it a little bit. So I'm gonna give Harry Potter a 7 for the ending, and I'm gonna give Fellowship of the Ring an 8, with the caveat that if it was the movie, it'd get a perfect 10.
Well said. Well said. And I completely forgot about that quick little 10 points out of there at the end. So thanks for reminding me of that. So we have now a winner. We have a winner, and I'm going to share my screen right now. Once I find it. Here we go. Dun dun! We have a winner! Fellowship of the Ring is the winner, which it did win more than 0.1.
That's pretty close. That's pretty close.
It is.
So it is really close. It's actually kind of surprising.
Is this the closest you've ever had, Aaron?
I think so. I think this is the closest. Mm-hmm. Wow. Looking at these, let's see.
That's the problem with doing such great books, is that they're going to be so close together.
Yeah. What's interesting is like when you put them side by side like this and just ask specific questions like about the plot and the characters and the magic. It's interesting that I view them both so highly in my mind, clearly, but at the same time, if you had asked me before tonight, I don't really find these books comparable at all. Like, if I was ranking them, like Harry Potter is not going to be close to my list when it comes to favorites, but I love having the opportunity to acknowledge that, like, no, like these are some things that were done really well in this book, and I just love that every time I really get into a good discussion about Harry Potter, I'm able to be reminded that it's not just nostalgia that drives my love for the series; it's a great series.
Well said.
Yeah. And I would say, even though I gave Lord of the Rings more points in this game, I would say that from if we had done an enjoyability rating, if that had been part of it, to me, Harry Potter would blow it out of the water, because it's so fun, and Harry Potter is such an enjoyable reading experience, which is usually like the reason I'm reading usually is because I want to have a fun time reading the book. And as Lord of the Rings, it is so seminal and so impressive and so important, but it's also at times cumbersome, and it doesn't have that enjoyability factor. So even though I gave higher rating here to Lord of the Rings, I enjoy reading Harry Potter much more.
But didn't you enjoy reading Tom Bombadil, right?
Never.
So I will say that as you guys probably know, I'm pretty much audio exclusive, and both of these series have incredible audio options. And if you've never had the chance to listen to the Andy Serkis narration
Oh,
of Lord of the
yes.
Rings, you would
Yes.
listen. You would want to listen to Tom Bombadil all day when it's Andy Serkis doing.
I need to give that a try. Then I listened to just the Hobbit thing that he
Incredible.
did, but
Yes.
I need to listen to the Lord of
He
the Rings
does
part just for
somehow
that.
he does every voice spot on. But then again, I love both narrations of Harry Potter as well. I'm very fond of Stephen Fry in general, so I love that version. But you get great options with both series.
I'm actually trying the audiobook of Fellowship of the Ring. I'm a failed audiobook listener, Madison. I'm the worst in the world. But after listening to Alan narrate my first book, and I thought, okay, maybe I can listen to audiobooks. So
especially if it's something you know so intimately, like your own book or Lord of the Rings.
It works because I don't have to worry about missing something or rewinding. And I know Lord of the Rings inside and out. So I think it's going to work. I'm listening to Andy Serkis, and he kind of imitates the other actors from the films.
He
But he
does.
does
Yeah.
So
He does
it's
a
fun.
good Sean Bean.
Yeah.
He's pretty good at Gollum too. He does a pretty good job with him.
Yeah, he practiced.
If he didn't, that'd be a problem. I will say audiobooks work for me really well on reread because, as you said, you've already gotten the story there, and it's something that I can turn on when I'm working on something else. But for a first-time read, my bigger problem is not that I might miss something; it's that it's so darn slow. Is that I can read even when I turn on the audiobook at faster speeds, it's still too slow for me. So I'm I need to be physically reading it.
Well, guys, I think we come to our conclusion.
We did it.
Fellowship of the Ring is the winner tonight, and I had so much fun. Thank you all for being here. I know we it did not work out the first time. I'm glad that we got back together to see the Fellowship of the Ring be the winner, and I had a blast. So again, thanks for being here. Thank you for everyone who's watching here right now, and thanks for being here. Have a good one. See you guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Aaron.